Hi, I'm Mike Holtzclaw, Communications Coordinator for the City of Hampton. This is Round Robin. I am guest hosting today, and my guest is Hampton High School football coach, former Hampton High School football coach, Mike Smith. Mike, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you, Mike.
And it's still my instinct to address you as coach. I think you'll always be coach.
I think that's very acceptable because it's always been that way.
It's an honorable title, and I would guess when you walk the streets of Hampton, there are still hundreds and hundreds of people who address you as coach.
I don't even know that they know my name other than coach.
I like it. Here we are getting into the early part of summer. If you were still coaching, what would you be doing right now in preparation for the next season?
Well, you have your workouts you're allowed to lift, and you can do certain amounts of teamwork now. As in the old days, you couldn't do these things. So we always had workouts and beginning, usually at the end of the season, beginning on a schedule that in January, running through the spring, and then when school's out, you have to set up usually 2 times because some of the kids are working, and then you'd have a morning session and an afternoon session, anywhere from 3 to 4 times a week.
Does it feel strange to not be doing that? Does it feel strange right now to not be thinking ahead to when does practice start? Who is our first opponent? It's been a long time since you haven't been thinking in those terms.
Well, it started a little earlier each year now, it seems, because we had a game that I think 21st maybe. The schedule was made for one of the scrimmages. Already I'd communicated with the guy that's going to Lansdowne. Tommy Reeman had left, and Tommy had contacted me, and then the coach that went over there agreed, so that's going to be one of the scrimmages. Woodrow's taking care of all that, and I'm happy to hand it over to him. And he's a true crabber. He was all-state 2 ways, running back and defensive back in the first state championship as a head coach that I won.
Coach Woodrow Wilson, who has been given the task of following Mike Smith at Hampton High School, but keeping it in the family, right?
Well, he's in the family, and but he's got his own ideas of what he wants to do, and he's going to do a good job.
Was that important to you to have someone in the family, a crabber, taking that job after you?
I think the important thing was to maintain some consistency with the kids that we had coming back, and but it's like he's paid his dues. I mean, he's been around there a long time and helped us out and been a big part of the coaching, running the weight program, coaching offense and defensive backs. He's been a big part of the program, so Woodrow's not going to need any help. I mean, you always have to have good assistants, and I was very fortunate I had some of the best. And
A few years ago, when you retired as Dean of Students at the school, for reasons of paperwork, you had to take a step back for a few months as football coach. How were you involved at all with the team at that time? Did you go to games? Did you go to practices, even though you weren't officially coaching?
It's a strange situation because the principal said, "You're still the head coach." I don't know how I'm the head coach. I can't coach. I did not go to practices. I went the first day, but I did not go because I didn't want the kids looking over, saying, coach over there, someone running the program over here. I wanted to put it in their hands. But that was a botched up signal. attorney and I, Steve Forbes and I, contacted the state. They couldn't even define it themselves. So they turned it over to a large law firm in Roanoke. And we said, well, time we'll get an answer back on that. You can forget spending your money. And they were wrong because of the way it was written, and they probably still do it. But other people had done the same thing. In other words, I'd had 2 assistants that retired, and both were coaching in the fall. But not me, boy. They're going to hammer me. It gets a little. I go out the door after 55 years as dean, and 49 of them was as the dean, and I don't remember if anyone shook my hand when I left or not.
Certainly should have, but
I don't. I loved the school, and I had, as I said, I had some really super good assistant coaches, and along with Woodrow in recent years, I had Kenny Gilliam, and Kenny had played on that team with Woodrow, and Butta Williams. But going back to the days where the intensity started, I think, I had a guy named Bob Tyson early on, then Alvis Mann for 35 years.
Sure.
Just one of the best people ever walked on the face of the earth. And Danny Mitchell, who had played, and I'd coached Danny when I was assistant coach. So I had those guys, Danny and Alvis, there for years and years. I had Bob several years, and he went up to Richmond and ultimately became the principal of Hermitage High School. And he was an excellent coach. But you missed the camaraderie of those guys. I used to miss Alvis. I know Alvis was home watching Wagon Train or I Love Lucy while I was out in the heat practice after he retired. He was a super good person and coach.
So, just to put a perspective on your career, the numbers that you always hear: 51 years as a head coach, 506 coaching victories, third most in national history.
Well, we actually averaged, you say 51, and you look at 506, you said that doesn't average out to 10 wins plus a year, but you have to realize that it actually equals to 50 years of participation as a head coach for me, because I only got to coach 4 or 5 games that one year on retirement.
Right.
And then the first year of the COVID was 5 games. So it actually ended up being 50 years on the dot. So we were very fortunate. We averaged more than 10 wins a year. Never had a losing season.
46 times in the playoffs, 12 state championships. It's a good run.
I should have done a better job. We should have had at least 18 or 20. But it's also very fortunate. There's a couple of old adages that you have to look at. It's a lot easier to put a saddle on a stallion than to train a mule to be a racehorse. And the other one is, no one ever won the Derby on a mule. You had to have some thoroughbreds. We had a lot of thoroughbreds. And I say that in all respect to what good athletes they were. And back in the old days, they didn't mind the work. Today, it's a little different, a little bit. First, you have to spend so much time getting the kids aligned with themselves and understanding what hard work is these days, at least to some point. But in the older days, they knew what hard work was. And you knew that when Wednesday afternoon come and you started practice, you better hustle, because you had to get it in pretty early, because Grandma and Mom we're going to make sure they's in church on Wednesday night. You could practice on Sunday morning now and not have a problem, I think.
Tell me, now you were an assistant coach at Hampton for 6 years. How did you move into the head coaching job? How did that happen?
I was assistant coach to Johnny Palmer. Just great guy. Could sit in the stands and watch a football game and write down or see more than any person that's ever been. I don't care who they were. But he didn't spend a whole lot of time watching film, and I usually end up doing all that and different things. So I'd helped out some guys over at Pembroke. I think Bert Smith was the principal at the time, but I'd helped some guys go to college. One of them, particularly in memory, is Jackie Shields. He went on down to Ferrum Junior College, and he went to, I forget when he moved on for the last 2 years, but a great guy. And they offered me the job to go to Pembroke. I was 29 years old and knew everything, and so I signed the contract. And Johnny had said, "No, Coach, don't leave. I'll give you my supplement." He's assistant basketball. I said, "Johnny, it's not the money. I just want to go spread my wings." Well, my wings wouldn't have stayed on long. I'd have been employed in a different capacity, I would imagine. But he said, "Well, if you're going over there, I'm going back to Lynchburg." And so I went to O.E. Ware, and the superintendent at that time wanted to hire somebody else. And O.E. Ware said, stuck to his guns and said, "Oh." And I always appreciated that. O.E. used to say, "This shows you how smart I was."
That's right. That's right.
But it was a great tradition at the school. Coach Sue Easton had been there and did a tremendous job. There were 3 or 4 coaches that had a lot of success there. A couple didn't have too much success. But Crabber's a unique place at that time.
Still, don't you think?
Well, yes, and it's become quite a challenge in the schools these days. I would have, of the guys' discipline, I probably had several years, I did 90% of it, I guess. But the last few years I was more in I don't know, just out to make sure the school was running and everybody was behaving. But the year that I retired in 2018, we started getting some kids in it were more of a challenge. And you understand that because both parents had to work, and a lot of times the student was left out on their own. So a lot of times you had to rein them back in. They wanted a loose rein. They wanted the fences taken down. They had to corral them.
At the time that you were assistant coaching and then starting as head coach, was a time of transition in Virginia high schools. The schools were desegregating, and what challenges or opportunities did that present to a football coach during that period of change?
Well, we started integration into the school when I was an assistant coach for a couple of years. And of course, for Hampton High School and football and the school itself, best thing ever happened. I mean, we had some good teams previously, but I realized that one night we were getting ready to play a game, and three athletes, football players, showed up. We were getting dressed. They showed up to pick up a film from Shug Turner, who was the coach at Pembroke, which was Phoenix at the time. And in that group was a guy named Billy Joe Roberts, who was later the sheriff.
Sure.
And Cunningham, three of them, and they all were about 6'3". I'm looking and saying, "Geez, we found these guys 5'9", 5'10". Were you guys from HU? You said, no, we're from Phoenix High School. But yes, we got good ones, and probably early on came over was a young man named Teddy Powell, tremendous athlete. And we had to get to have a meeting of the minds. I was coaching and became one of the. He never came in town. I mean, he ended up going to Ferrum, got him at Ferrum, played at Ohio State, played with the Birmingham Stallions. And he's a tremendous athlete and person. Always contact me. And unfortunately, he passed away, and he lived in Richmond, and nobody realized it. I think it's diabetes, something. But no, that was, I would say, when the integrated schools, and you know, the blessing was that I think football was a strong point in this. We never had a racial issue at Hampton High School.
That's great.
Never had a racial issue in those years I was there. So I think football helped mold to blend that together. But you also, people outside probably don't understand it as well, that although you had segregation in school, the people in Hampton were always very communicative of racial issues. They lived together and worked together. But no, I never thought of it. When I first started school, I started in Indiana. I was born in Indiana, and of course, the schools were integrated there at the time. So it just, that's the thing for me. I always wondered, when I was playing in high school, they were busing the kids up to Big Stone Gap to Bland High School, and I was always wondering why we didn't have those guys playing with us. They were our friends, but it worked out great, and it's been good.
I wanted to ask you about a few of the young men who played for you over the years. And to be honest, my favorite Crabber football player, who was before my time here, was Dwight Stephenson. And I'm fascinated by Dwight Stephenson's story because I realized in his entire life, he played for 3 football coaches. Mike Smith, the third-winningest coach in national history. Bear Bryant, who retired as the winningest college coach in history. Don Shula, the winningest coach in NFL history. And that's a heck of a resume for a football player. He had never played before you recruited him out to your team. What did you see in a teenage Dwight Stephenson?
Well, he was best friends with Kenny Gilliam, Woodrow Wilson, Simon Gupton, Marvin Brown, those guys that were a group that ended up winning the first state championship that I was part of as a head coach. But we were down a basketball game. I was with Kenny and Woodrow and those guys in the wintertime, and they were having a JV game, and I saw Dwight, and I asked Kenny, I said, "Who is that?" He said, "Crip." I said, "Crip?" Said, "Well, we call him Crip because he stays broken up all the time." So I said, "Well, we'll patch him up." And I talked to Dwight and came out for football. And he started both ways first year. And he was so tough that we didn't have another center. And he twisted his ankle. Honest to goodness, it was big, much larger than a softball. And he could barely walk back to the line of scrimmage. He'd go double and come off and play. But the one thing you've got to know, you heard of the Refrigerator Perry, who was supposedly the most dominating lineman in the NFL at that time on defense. And it's either Perry's first or second year. They were playing the Dolphins. And Perry, of course, playing middle guard, playing on Dwight's nose. Dwight had a separated shoulder. He had this arm taped in, snapping the ball with his hand, and had him here. He didn't make a tackle all night. Most amazing job I ever saw. He was a great one, and he pretty much accepted he's the best center that ever played in the NFL.
An outstanding man.
Oh, he is unbelievable to this day. I mean, he certainly is. He's a tremendous person. Yeah, Dwight's a tremendous person.
Of course, I have to ask you about Ronald Curry. That I did not see Ronald play as a freshman. By the time I saw him as a sophomore, I had heard so much about him that I truly, truly believed, I know he's going to be great, but he can't impress me because he's been built up so much. And literally within the first quarter, I was saying, he's better than I heard. And for all of his physical gifts, even at age 15, he was such an instinctive player. I could just watch him, and it was like he was seeing the game in slow motion in front of him. He could just read so well. How old was he the first time that you saw him play? And just tell me about coaching him.
Well, I had the experience with his uncles that came through Hampton High School. They were different experiences than Ronald's. So someone said, "You got a great quarterback coming." And I said, "Yeah, Ronald Curry. Is he any kin to so and so?" "Yeah." I said, "I don't know, maybe he." Ronald Curry was undoubtedly the best high school football player to ever put a uniform on. I'm not talking about at Hampton High School. I'm talking about ever. Overall, the best. And he was equally good on defense. And now, Bubba Chuck Iverson was the best kickoff return man I ever saw. But Ronald was the best punt return guy. But the one thing about Ronald that made him so good, in addition to athletic ability, super intelligent. Super intelligent. His mind was like a computer. And respectful. He was, had Ronald Curry gone ahead and gone to Virginia school, he'd have been more popular than Thomas Jefferson or anybody that's ever been a political figure in Virginia and had more money than any of them ever had. But, he was challenged to play basketball, and he loved basketball, but he was so gifted in football. A hard worker. As gifted as he was a hard worker. So we've had so many good ones, you know. Robert Banks, National Player of the Year. Marcus Hagan, who's the head coach at University of Virginia presently. He was another one going to play football. Came over, lived in his mom with his grandfather at the beginning of his sophomore year. And I met him, had already been practicing a couple of weeks. And when Alvis Mann took me and introduced me, he was over talking to our trainer. He was going in and practicing some basketball. Now, he at Bethel went out for football one day, took the uniform, went home, never came back. But he played basketball and started when he was 13 years old. Yeah, he was 16 years old when he played his last game till December the 31st, his senior year, but tremendous football player. And he's done so well. Tyrod Taylor. You're talking about people, all those people, their behavior was just as good as their playing ability. All super good people. And to this day they still are.
You mentioned a moment ago Allen Iverson from Bethel High School, who everybody knows played a little basketball, but people who were here know what he could do on the football field. What was it like? You went head-to-head against him. What was it like preparing to play against Allen Iverson when he was at Bethel High School? How did you try to prepare for that young man?
Well, we played against some great ones, and then Bubba Chuck was. He worked real hard and prayed even harder. He was a good one, and Michael Vick was a good one. Michael Vick was a great kid. I always thought the world of him. I like Bubba Chuck. Although Bubba Chuck, one day we were playing his senior year, I brought somebody over to give him a play. It might have been Meyer Newsom's quarterback. I hear somebody say, "Hurry up, Coach, get the play in. Coach, get that play in. I'm waiting on you." I looked at Bubba Chuck standing over on the numbers right up beside me. I said, "Get yourself back in the middle of that field." He was a competitor, though. He had to tell you what, great competitor. So they've been so, like I said earlier, we were so fortunate to have the people that we had. And we played against some others that were also good.
Remember you told me once about Iverson that to this day, if he's back home and he sees you, he will make it a point to walk away from whoever he's with to come over and say hi and talk
Oh, he
to
always
you.
has. Yeah, I always had a deep appreciation for he and Michael Vick. In competing against them because they were just such strong competitors. And I guess here next week we got Mike Tomlin coming back in with his game, and Vern Lee Jr. who played for the Crabbers, and they do such a good job for the youth around here with that. And I remember Mike Tomlin. I think maybe any team I ever coached might have lost to Denby twice. I lost to them tonight. We were playing them because they said Aaron Monday tackled him by the ear hole. Now, how you do that, I have no idea. But I think the world of Mike. And I'll be seeing him here. We've had some good people come out this peninsula.
Absolutely.
Great athletes and good people.
When the season begins this fall, Hampton High School's opening football game, where will you be?
I'll be in the bleachers. Yeah, actually, I'm going to be in the bleachers when they have their scrimmages. I'm going to go watch them. I'm not going to go down and interfere.
It's going to be hard not to be taking notes about what they need to fix.
No, I wouldn't do that, because now my wife might. She removed herself from all the catcalls and things at me. She sat on the very top level, but she sat right over next to the booth there where our cameraman was, and she is hollered for those kids so much over the years. And then she would always tell me where our shortcomings were when we had a bad game. And she was pretty much on the nose with it.
She knew a thing or two.
She loved the crappers. She still does. I mean, but yeah. So
that's great. Coach Mike Smith, thank you so much for coming in today. It has been my honor for 30 years living in this area to watch Hampton High School football, and congratulations on a great career. And I'm glad you're going to get to enjoy retirement. Thank you so much for coming in. I am Mike Holtzclaw, Communication Coordinator for the City of Hampton. This has been Round Robin.